Кайырлы күн, құрметті әріптестер, dear guests, dear participants, уважаемые дамы и господа, позвольте начать панельную сессию, посвященную...
Dear ladies and gentlemen, let me start the session of the perspectives of forming carbon market in the Republic of Kazakhstan. As it is known, the head of state, Mr. Tokayev, 2 years ago, has established the strategy of which is aimed at carbon neutrality. We are working on a roadmap on how to achieve carbon neutrality and net zero. We have heard the message of the president yesterday, and the climatic problem is the key problem of achieving sustainable development in the Central Asian countries, especially in the country of Kazakhstan. The organizers of our panel session are, first of all, the Ministry of the Ecology. Please, warm welcome. Moreover, the project OECD, presented by Lida Thompson. As a part of OECD, George Safonov is here with us today. We also welcome the partners from the University of Central Asia who are leading on advancing the agenda, Mr. Christopher Jerry, and our speakers who are working on the issue of net zero and carbon neutrality. I guess everybody knows the representative of Kazakhstan. And Mr. Kulanush Beysingazin, who was working on the project of net zero, who is currently the key expert on work on elaborating the roadmap. Please, warm welcome. I appreciate the effort of organizers as the topic of carbon markets is the pioneer topic. We are talking a lot about the climate and what mechanisms should be implemented to reach net zero. And related to that, I would like to give the word to Maxim Tursunovich. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Dear participants, colleagues, partners, on behalf of the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources of the Republic of Kazakhstan, I welcome you here on this session, which is aimed at the discussion of carbon markets in Central Asia, the topic which is very pressing. I would like to express my gratitude to the Green Academy and the organizers for creating such platform for dialogue between the businesses, experts, and international organizations. I would also like to thank the representatives of OECD and the partners in international projects. We are aiming at the decreasing of greenhouse gases. Carbon markets are the essential part of our policy. Kazakhstan, as the country participant of Paris Agreement with ambitious goals by achieving net zero by 2050, we are working on a legal basis for creating carbon market. As of today, Kazakhstan is the only country who is working on carbon credits, and we are sure that this mechanism and its integration with international systems will create possibilities for businesses and for cooperation on climate agenda. In this session, we have a perfect opportunity to discuss common carbon market in Central Asia, to exchange experience and best practices, and to establish these steps on implementing. Dear colleagues and participants, only with joint and cooperation efforts we can create the conditions for green growth in our region. I wish every participant of our session luck and effective work. Thank you very much for your wishes. We know that the Minister of Ecology is working actively in this area, and the representatives are on the Glacier Forum in Dushanbe. We would like to wish the Minister of Ecology to continue being the leader in the area on creating the new mechanisms of carbon market, because today we have a lot of potential for that. Thank you very much for your welcoming speech. I would like to give the floor to Mr. William Thompson, who is the representative of OECD. I guess that this time I will be delivering the speech in the English language.
I want to say first thank you to the Green Academy, to the Ministry, to our SEPA partners, IDRI and the University of Central Asia, and to all of you for the chance to open this event. It's clear that we need carbon markets and probably also carbon taxes if we are going to really make the market work with us to address climate change and not spend our time fighting against the market. As of right now, the University of Central Asia SEPA research shows that investments into fossil fuel-based energy infrastructure account for between 56 and 93% of total energy investments across the region. Only in Uzbekistan at present do we find clean energy attracting a slight majority of the investment. That's not because investors are bad. That's because incentives are wrong. It's not that, it's not down to anyone's wickedness. It's about economic rationality. And we've been working with our partners in the region to address this through the work that SEPA has done on the long-term low-emission development strategies, including Kazakhstan's carbon neutrality strategy until 2060 and the implementation roadmap, which we very much welcome. This is a leadership step in the region where Kazakhstan is moving ahead. I just want to really make 3 points. First of all, why do we need carbon markets? And I've already kind of said it. Until we get carbon meaningfully priced, we will raise the cost of every investment and every policy intervention in sustainability, and we will simultaneously reduce the returns on every investment and intervention seeking to advance sustainability. It's not that I think that we simply set a carbon price and let the market do its work. There will be a lot of investment, innovation, intervention required to deliver the outcomes we need. But as long as we don't have carbon prices that are by an order of magnitude higher than we find in most countries, not only in Kazakhstan, but around the world, they are far too low. We are simply, pushing with one hand against the work that the other hand is trying to do. We need to get the market working with us and to help countries also stimulate the innovation that is needed because we don't know what all the solutions are. So it's not just a matter of deciding what has to be done and giving instructions. One of the beautiful things about markets is the way, when the incentive is there to innovate, they generate innovations. So carbon markets and also carbon taxes, forms of carbon pricing that stimulate this are vital. Secondly, how do we make them effective? We have a challenge here because a market needs to be flexible. That's the whole point of a market, supply and demand, people responding to incentives. On the other hand, we know that these markets are there to deliver a carbon price that reflects the real externalities of carbon emissions, and that means we also have to have a long-term sense of what the price path should be. So it's a bit of an unusual way to structure a market. Kazakhstan is so far the only country in Central Asia with an emissions trading system, and I'm pleased to say we have been working with the authorities here on the reform of that system. They made a good start, but as we know, prices are too low. There are many issues still to address, and we've given guidance based on OECD experience about ways of phasing out free allowances, making explicit the rise of the ETS price through stabilization measures like setting a price floor with a predictable path, using carbon revenues generated in this way to support an effective and, very importantly, a just low-carbon transition. And finally, how do we make these markets operate with integrity, because one thing we see in many countries, and I think it's one of the challenges with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, even among countries, not just among private actors, is the potential, frankly, for gaming the system. We need, as we see in our work on carbon markets, high-quality data, transparency, robust governance frameworks, and that's particularly critical for the kind of voluntary carbon markets that are underpinned, in the implementation of Article 6. Effective monitoring, reporting, and verification systems are really important. And in this respect, Kazakhstan, working with the Green Academy, working with my organization, the OECD, and others, has been working to strengthen that system, the kind of monitoring and reporting and verification. This is absolutely clear, and it is something that I think Kazakhstan also needs to help us share regionally. We're just in opening remarks, and there's many speakers, so I will stop there only by saying that one of the reasons we need markets is we don't know what all the solutions are. We need a dynamic, innovative market open to entrepreneurship and investment to deliver solutions that perhaps today we don't even think of. And that's why this regional peer learning and events like this are important, and I look forward to hearing what others have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for nice greetings, including recommendations. Thank you very much. Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, we also have the session at the same time with our colleagues. I would like to ask you to welcome and give a round of applause to Mansour Oshurbayev. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I wish you a productive session. Dear colleagues, we are continuing our session. I would like to have it as in an informal way. Please feel free to ask the questions. We have the representatives of Ministry of Ecology, of Jasildamu and other organizations, and I guess that we can ask questions and have a discussion. I would like to give the word to Mr. Georgy Safonov, who is the lead expert in IDRI SIPA OECD. You know that Kazakhstan owes a lot to Mr. Safonov, as he was the part of the first of NDC, of the first ONU NDC. Dear Georgy, we are welcoming you. We are expecting an interesting message from you on how our countries can move forward to net zero and carbon market, what is the role of Article 6 of Paris Agreement. There is a special Article 6.468 on carbon markets. What is your vision, how we can use this potential, and is there potential in Central Asia? Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate a lot for inviting me for that session during that forum, Astana International Forum. Thank you to Green Academy for organizing this event, to have an opportunity to exchange the practices. I would like to hear from the audience and from you. We have some vision, and we would like to know what is happening in the region of Central Asia and in the framework of our development of sustainable infrastructure in Central Asia, SIPA project, which is coordinated by OECD, and we are the key players in this project. We have found out that there is a huge potential in all countries in Central Asia. Different countries have different approaches in order to assess this potential and to form the strategy and to implement various tools to reach the reduction of emissions, to have transition to green economy, what we have seen for the in the latest times. We have seen good results. Yeah, Kazakhstan has declared itself as the leader in low carbon development and in reaching of net zero by 2060. But I don't think that many believe and know that Mongolia, for example, the country who is participating in our project, has announced that they will reach net zero by 2050. Their strategy, Vision 2050, implements the step-by-step implementation to reach net zero. Uzbekistan is working a lot in this area these days. They are discussing the strategy of net zero by 2055. As we said, Kazakhstan has the strategy by 2060, and other countries want to reach that goal earlier. I think that is a very interesting competition. As we see, there is a strategic vision, but there are also some certain steps, and various countries have various assessment criteria. Kazakhstan is leading thanks to development of roadmap. The roadmap is being developed actually, but there are special and specific directions and areas on what lack of information we have. There are separate, specific, intermediate goals. It is a huge work, and the Institute of Economical Research has done a lot of work, and we believe that they will continue, and we participate and cooperate with them in this area. We also see that Uzbekistan is working on identifying yearly and annual goals on transition to green model. There are a lot of investors who will continue invest and are already investing in a large-scale project on renewables. Other countries of the region may behave differently. Let's consider Mongolia. The main question on how and when China will stop importing coal. As long as they have the demand from China within the 15 years, they will export coal. But if China will accelerate the transition to green economy, the demand for coal from Mongolia might drop, and they are rethinking their strategies now. These questions are crucial. We see that within the region there is a lot of cooperation. People, families, all the region is working as the conglomerate of countries of the region which we need to analyze and to coordinate our efforts. In this area, we are planning to make some assessment with the partners in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and other countries. We will start working on that starting from next year. And we also have the question, the main issue is where to get the money. We might have great goals, we might have beautiful strategies and step-by-step plans on how to achieving the goals, but the question is, who is going to pay for that transition? Based on the assessment of the Institute of Research, we have approximate assessment from 500 to 600 billion will be required to reach net zero in Kazakhstan by 2060. I think we will continue discussing it, but the question is still there. Where do we get the money for that? And the question I was asked from Bahit, what is the role of international mechanisms like Article 6 of Paris Agreement and other mechanisms or other measures of climate investment and financing? These markets of bonds and special bonds, they are increasing and reaching trillions of dollars. I would like to give approximate estimation. As per the discussion that we had during the training on Tuesday, we got the following figures. Vietnam might be #1 among developing countries, which counted how much money will be needed and how much money will be invested to the decarbonization of Vietnam. About 30% of all investment can be acquired from international mechanisms, attracting investment, technologies, resources, know-hows, in order to make the transition to green economy and carbon-free economy. Similar assessments were for Egypt and other countries. They are specific, they have specific programs and specific projects. If we talk about and consider the similar percentage could be referred to Kazakhstan, for example. For example, 30% would be attracted from international mechanisms.
On one hand, is a great resource. It is important for transition. On the other hand, Kazakhstan has a huge potential, can actually offer the technical decision, nature-based solutions on the increase of the debonding of the carbon emissions, which is really important. It had been already formulated and formed by the president, which is the carbon farming. I hope everyone knows about it, and so we'll also elaborate on that. So we have the potential for this measure. Attract significant large resources via international cooperation. We already have the experience. I see it as an interesting perspective for Central Asia overall, especially for Kazakhstan, and taking into consideration the elaboration of our president on the net zero and the program of the interaction, and I think that this platform could be something that we could benefit from. Thank you so much, Georgi. I think on Vietnam and Mongolia there will be some questions because they're quite active in the market. I would like to ask speakers to keep in time, 10 minutes, so that we could have Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Rector of University of Central Asia, Dr. Giri, welcome to Astana International Forum. We know that University of Central Asia is a leading in achievement on promotion carbon agenda in Bishkek, in Tajikistan, in Kharok, in your university, and can you share with us your vision how Kazakhstan can promote carbon agenda through education, science, and improvement of capacity building, please?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Bakit, and thank you for inviting me to this session, and also for always including and thinking of the role of universities in all of these issues. We often get overlooked, but universities play a critical role in building capacity and so on, as I'll explain in a moment. So you posed me a question about the institutions and the capacities that are necessary in order to underpin the carbon markets in Central Asia and Kazakhstan in particular. As I've been at the other sessions over the last couple of days listening, there's been a lot focused on some of the core competencies and some of the technical competencies that need to be built. And so I'm not going to say much about those, but we've heard about them in terms of the regulatory and policy frameworks, the technical and monitoring frameworks, the financial and investment frameworks, the market infrastructure and carbon literacy frameworks, and then, of course, the institutional coordination frameworks within and across countries. And so in addition to those core competencies at national level, there's a bunch of general institutional frameworks that also need to exist at different levels, be it national, international, regional, and so on. So you have things like the green investment banks and regulatory structures and national climate councils and so on at national levels. At the technical level, there's things like monitoring, reporting, and verification units and so on. At local government and municipality level, I come from a university which operates in small towns, actually, in Central Asia. And one of the big lessons that we learn is that there's almost zero capacity at local municipality level for thinking up green infrastructure projects and knowing about how to go about those projects, let alone even apply for funding and finance for those projects. And then, as we heard in the session before lunch, for anyone that was in this room, the importance of the private sector and public-private partnerships, the role that business councils and chambers of commerce and so on have in advocating for carbon pricing, carbon reduction and so on. And then, of course, there's the strategic enablers that operate across countries through partnership with the big multilateral institutions and so on. But they're all things that are outside of the scope of universities. So I just want to say a few things about the role of universities in providing the kind of key ecosystem for facilitating carbon markets. And this is through three means. Firstly, through increasing the credibility that underpins markets. Second, through the research that gives rise to that credibility. And thirdly, through shaping and building the human capital necessary for building carbon markets. And so for universities in general, there are at least four areas. One is in capacity building and education. So, for example, in building programs of education for students, for civil servants, for policymakers, and so on, whether that be in degree programs or in executive education or in credentialing and so on, increasingly in climate financing, in environmental law, in monitoring, reporting and verification, in carbon accounting, and so on. These are all essential things, and we often meet in platforms like this and we talk about it as though policymakers are really aware of these things and implementers are aware and aware of these things, and they're often that's often very far from the truth, particularly, as I say, once you move away from capital cities. The second area is in research and policy support. So who is it that's going to learn and teach and undertake the quantification of emissions, the calculating of carbon sequestration potential, the evaluation of policy, the evaluation of the impact of policy, rather, the study of carbon pricing, economic modelling and ecological modelling. These are all things that are, if not best done, at least majorly done within university structures. So that's capacity building, research and policy support. The third is in technical infrastructure. Universities are homes to centres. They bring hubs. They bring the possibility for bringing universities together with policymakers and so on through technical infrastructure hubs. So labs and centres, for example, which can focus on greenhouse emissions modelling, building expertise and so on in remote sensing and GIS and other forms of climate modelling. And then the fourth area is in convening power. Universities are excellent conveners. They bring together in neutral spaces policymakers, business, public servants, civil society, where dialogue can take place on carbon markets, climate finance, nature-based solutions, and so on. And in that sense, they can act as think tanks, enabling carbon markets to develop. My university is the University of Central Asia, and it's a somewhat unique university in that it straddles three countries legally. It operates in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and in Tajikistan, and is also active through 4 centres in Afghanistan and increasingly active also in Uzbekistan. So it's operating across the region, and nearly every session I've been in here this week has talked about the need for cross-regional collaboration. So the University of Central Asia is naturally positioned to promote this kind of coordination and collaboration. In addition, our university, the major strength is in climate and environmental science and cryosphere science, and modelling climate change, modelling water and food security patterns, but also underpinned by a strong economics program of research and education. And these two things together are very powerful, economics and ecology and environment. And UCA provided last year the first high-resolution cross-Central Asia modelling of climate change over the last 3 or 4 decades for this region, and it's now publicly available data. It was done in collaboration with University of Kyoto because there isn't the infrastructure, the technical infrastructure within the countries of Central Asia to produce this kind of of modeling. So that's a research strength. The third area is in capacity building. Later this year, UCA will launch its cross-regional MSc program in economic analysis and data science with a strong emphasis on environmental economics and a pathway through in environmental economics. And we're also now, between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, developing a program in environmental management and climate change, which is a more environmentally science-oriented program. But linked to all of these, of course, are short courses, credentialing, and so on, aimed at other markets, at policymakers, and so on. And we're just in the process of finalizing an executive education course called Carbon Markets 101. And this reflects that we're catering to a market where 101 knowledge really is necessary across the board. There's lots of expertise, but it's in pockets and not necessarily where it needs to be. And that's come from our needs analysis in this area. So the capacity building, expertise, and so on. Applied research, of course, is another area that universities bring, and that UCA would like to work more actively in this area in collaboration with other partners. So things like piloting carbon offset projects, such as forest conservation, renewable energy, rangeland reforestation, sustainable pasture management, and so on. I mentioned earlier that our campuses are based in remote mountain communities in Horog in Tajikistan, in Narin in Kyrgyzstan, and hopefully in the future in Tekeli in Kazakhstan. And in Narin now we have a proposal to develop the campus into a living lab, which will provide a natural place for experimentation around some of these carbon capture possibilities. And for UCA, and this is something that me and you, Bakit, have been discussing for a year, how do we get an easy starter to bring along universities with policymakers and other stakeholders in this area? And one thing that we're currently working on is a proposal, along with a little bit of investment, to create a climate and monitoring, reporting and verification lab for Central Asia, maybe as a precursor to a major regional climate research center. And so through this we propose technical educational, for it to become a technical educational convening hub for capacity building in climate data, carbon accounting, monitoring systems and so on, to leverage expertise that we already have and other universities have in remote sensing, GIS expertise, ecological monitoring and so on, to collect the baseline data and then the impact data to see what the result of these initiatives are, and to undertake climate data, ecological modeling and economics modeling, and to promote monitoring, reporting and verification systems through training. Unless we believe that the monitoring is credible, the reporting is credible and it's verifiable, we ain't going anywhere with any of this, basically. And the basis for that has to come from universities. So just to conclude, it's clear that Central Asia needs the competences and the institutions. That's widely accepted and discussed all through the sessions. But the knowledge systems themselves are generated at the university level. And universities can therefore be the catalyst to embed carbon markets in our region. And UCA is definitely ready to play its part regionally in connecting minds and in shaping the carbon-reduced future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Chris. I think it is a broader program for capacity building in Central Asia. I know that yesterday you met with Minister of Education and Science of Kazakhstan, Mr. Sayasat Nurbek, and welcome to Kazakhstan. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, next speaker is Dr. Sakir Devrin Yilmaz, Senior Research, French Development Agency. Уважаемые коллеги, я хотел бы
Dear colleagues, I would like to give a floor to Sakir Devrim Yilmaz, who is representing Agency of French Development. We also have the head of the French fund here, Gulnoza, and we would like to wish you the good start in Kazakhstan. We know that we had the French-Kazakh investment forum, and you have already concluded certain agreements, and we hope that this fund will also give us impetus for the development of different research projects as well as initiatives.
Please, Sakir.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me here. And as Bakit has mentioned, I am a senior researcher at French Development Agency, and I'm mainly involved in modeling energy transition, analytical models of energy transition, in some of which we involve carbon taxes. So the first thing I would like to really mention is maybe it's not very clear to non-economists about how carbon markets or emission trading systems may be facilitating the transition. Mr. Thompson before mentioned that it is the only way because we don't know anything else, and that's more or less correct, of course. And because we don't know any other market-based solution, and how could an emission trading system really help? From a modeling perspective, how does the economic incentive really work behind the emission trading? And there's a few channels through which emission trading will actually facilitate and enhance the carbon transition. And one of the first ones is, of course, the most obvious one, is that when there's a carbon trading market, this increases the profitability of firms which are invested in green technologies and which are invested in renewables, non-emission technologies and all this. So there's a direct profitability effect, first of all. And this is what creates the incentives, if you like, because when you compare it with what we call brown investments, there is an additional revenue that is generated by the by the allowances that can be sold in the market. So when the firms sell the allowances in the market, that generates revenues for them, and that increases profits first and foremost. And that, of course, encourages firms rather to invest in green technologies rather than non-green technologies, because there's an additional profit there to be taken. And of course, it also relaxes their cash flows, as you can imagine. That's because, again, the sale of carbon allowances generates continuous revenues for the firms. And that, of course, eases the cash flow of the firm, meaning that the firms need less financing for the investment project. They need to borrow less because they can generate revenues by selling the allowances. And of course, that stimulates investment once again in the NDC-related investments or green investments, if you like. And of course, carbon markets also reduce the risk. Once the firms know the price, the cost, or the revenues that they can generate from reducing emissions, there's no risk because the price is known, the regulations are there. You actually know as a firm what is going to happen in the coming years. So there's less and less uncertainty, if you like. And as a result, all these mechanisms encourage the firms to invest in NDC-related or green technologies rather than brown technologies. These are, in a nutshell, the very basic, simple logic of why a carbon market is going to push the firms towards investing in green technologies rather than brown ones. And then there's a few other issues which are as important as the ones I've mentioned, and one of the fundamental ones is the fiscal space that carbon taxes might create, especially if the allowances are auctioned and sold rather than distributed for free. Because if the government is selling carbon allowances, then that is generating a large amount of funds for the government that it can use afterwards to mitigate the negative effects on vulnerable households, particularly vulnerable households. This is crucial, and Mr. Thompson briefly mentioned this. I want to elaborate a little bit on this. some industries inevitably will suffer during the transition. There's no denial of this, basically. Some have to go, and new ones will have to flourish. And there are people working for those industries that will disappear or that will shrink. So these people need to be retrained. They need to be subsidized. They need to be directed to new jobs. And all these things are costly, of course. And there's only one entity in the economy that can do this. That is the government. And of course, if there's a carbon market there, and if the allowances are being auctioned and sold, there is going to be funds in the government's hands that it can use for these purposes. This is extremely important to make sure that the energy transition is just. Again, another topic that was mentioned multiple times before. We need to make sure that the energy transition is fair to everyone. And that fairness requires these funds on the government sense. And another important point is that carbon markets, because they allow trading both domestically and internationally, it will bring foreign direct investment to the country, especially if the carbon allowances are traded with abroad. And foreign direct investment for countries like Kazakhstan, and actually for all developing economies, foreign direct investment is the most secure, most desired form of financing deficits of foreign exchange. Because most countries, including Kazakhstan and many countries in the region, are running foreign exchange deficits. And what I mean with this is that when Kazakhstan buys some goods from the rest of the world, it cannot pay with tenge. It has to pay with dollars. So those dollars need to be found from somewhere, basically. And one of the most stable sources of finding those dollars is foreign direct investment, because that investment comes here and stays here, invests here, sets up factories, creates jobs, and stays here for a long time. This is not like volatile financial flows that can come in and out. These are permanent investment. And when that investment comes to the country through carbon trading, it actually allows Kazakhstan to find the dollars or the foreign exchange that it needs. That's one aspect, and this is very crucial. And another aspect of foreign direct investment that is really crucial is that generally foreign direct investment leads to domestic productivity gains, meaning that in general there is some form of technological transfer that takes place, either directly in some cases, and in other cases is indirect, meaning that domestic firms, by being exposed to more efficient technologies, actually learn from these technologies, and they start producing more efficiently, and they start developing their own technologies more efficiently. So there's this technology transfer that happens through FDI. So attracting FDI standing for foreign direct investment, is crucial, and carbon markets will allow attracting FDI to Kazakhstan. And there's one thing that I think, I'm just checking time, yeah. There's one thing though that I want to conclude by saying something that I think is very crucial, and it relates once again to the idea of just transition. And that is, when there's a carbon market or an emission allowance market that is set in a country, one of the things that the government needs to make sure is to ensure that the benefits of these carbon markets are not reaped by large corporations alone, but by also small communities. This is extremely important because it's the small communities that really get hurt by climate change and the transition. So the government needs to make sure that these carbon allowances or trading of carbon emissions can also be done for small community-based projects, small-scale projects as well, not just massive projects that big corporations are carrying out, but also small projects that are carried out for reducing emissions in little towns, little villages across the country, so that these people can also get the benefits of the carbon market as well. Once again, this is crucial for a fair transition, because the transition is going to be turbulent, and it's going to create social tension. And if we want to minimize those tensions and make sure that it's fair, we need to make sure that the mechanism works efficiently, not just for large corporations, but for everybody. Right? And I will conclude with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Devrim, for your contribution to our session. We hope that new model, I know that you promote the STEAM model. It's really innovative model, and we hope that integration this model to strategic planning system in Kazakhstan help us to finally achieve or promote carbon neutrality.
Dear colleagues, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Dosum Kudurbayev. He is representing the consulting group Rakurs, which is known for supporting farming. I know that he is working effectively in this area, and he probably knows what we in Kazakhstan should be doing in order to launch this voluntary carbon market. Thank you very much, Bahit. I'm not sure what kind of modeling is being made, probably in some other country, but this country where we aspire to be, because all the elements of your modeling cannot be applied to our country. We are at the final stage. We will be discussing with Mr. Koanish about the real situation, what is happening, and what kind of challenges we face. As in the previous panel session, it was said that without the fair price, without balancing the market of carbon trade, the carbon market will not be working. Now it is $1 with the price of $10 for carbon unit. The carbon projects which are working on natural resources cannot be launched. The price must be real, from which will be starting from $15, and that is when the domestic market will be working. And this will allow to compensate the emissions by buying carbon credits. Here another topic arises is the attraction of foreign investment. Two directions can be regarded here, Article 6 to 6.4 on voluntary markets. Regarding 6.2 article, the first step has been made, and Kazakhstan has signed with Japan the agreement based on which we have started some works, and with Mitsubishi Corporation we have signed the memorandum on the previous summit, which took place 2 years ago. Now we have applied for the project to reduce the emissions of methane when growing rice with the technology AWD, when the watering is being monitored, and which will lead to reduction of methane emissions and increasing the yield. We hope that this project will be the first to be considered with the Joint Commission, but we believe that first of all we need to adapt the methodology which exists in Vietnam, Cambodia and other countries. We need to adapt it for Kazakhstan before the Japanese partners can adopt them. And I'm very grateful for the representative of Mitsubishi Corporation has stayed here to listen to this session and take part in it. I appreciate that a lot. And the second area is the Article 6.4, where I think Kazakhstan is keeping pace with the world. The world is not ready, actually. We have a couple of years before we can launch this project, because we need to adapt methodology. If we are talking about the various lists, we have to work on the question of methodologies which will be applied and their integration and other principles of CP. We need to work on voluntary markets, where we have and see the boom. We see the surge. We see during COP28 we saw only 2 projects. First for farming and As far as I know, there are 10 projects under considerations, maybe 2, 3 on forests, and the others on irrigation lands. And what I would like to mention is that FAO, and they have launched the project on sustainable pasture farming and the separate component is this support to farmers to get the carbon credits. If we're talking about inclusivity, we see that farmers through sustainable farming can get benefits and carbon credits. This improves the quality of soil and it gives additional revenue for the farmers. This is a win-win situation, and within that the project consists of 2 parts. We have the part with 1,000 hectares in Balkhash region of Almaty region and 100,000 hectares in the west. As of now, the first part has been completed. Generally speaking, in Kazakhstan, we as the Ministry of Agriculture supports us, but unfortunately in Kazakhstan, there are no experts and no tools to get the probes of soil. There are several laboratories, but they are not functioning fully so that we could get the analysis on soil composition and the other components which we need in order to make the model. And this model is required in order to reduce the level of uncertainty. They identify buffer pool. Kazakhstan is at the level of 40, and the probability of error is very high. We don't particularly know how much carbon we have in the soil in various regions of the country. So this is the key task for us. It is partially institutional and partially infrastructural. Without it, the investments will not be attracted. It is crucial for us that on the basis of the project with FAO, we got the request from the startup from the United States. They are working on DMRV, on the modeling with the satellite images, but they need the data on soil analysis in special places of Kazakhstan. This is the combination of knowledge, experts, and physical presence in the country, which will allow us to reduce and to shorten the process of acquiring the data and which will create the potential and open the opportunities for other project developers. This is the ongoing project. We have currently signed for 10-year contracts on pastures, on sustainable management protocols. And the third project that I would like to mention, it is not related to the soil organic carbon. It is related to CDR. This project is highly ecological. There are a lot of wastes in agriculture. We see the solution in order to recycle the products into biofuel, which can be sold as carbon credits, and separately we will create the fertilizers which can get the share for farmers. From one side, we are reducing the carbon footprint from agriculture. On the other hand, we are making carbon removals and we are selling them abroad. And thirdly, we are producing the fertilizers, which will replace the mineral fertilizers, which emit the carbon. And the potential is huge in Kazakhstan. 180,000 hectares can be developed under these projects. I guess that Mr. Kuanish will tell us more about these projects on how we are going to LLU, LLCF is reflected in our NDC, and whether we have the potential as well as in Mongolia to realize it during the COP29. Thank you very much, Dosem, for telling us about this project. We wish you good luck. Thanks to FAO for their support. When we are talking about our responsibilities, we might forget about the potential we have. And finally, the main speaker of our panel session is Mr. Konush Bisingazin. He is the head of the National Bureau of Economic Research. He has been working on the strategy of carbon neutrality, and I believe that he is here today with us during our session. Thank you very much. I know that you can tell us a lot about net zero strategy because the document is vast. How is it planned to connect the carbon markets and whether they are going to be included in the roadmap project? Thank you very much, dear participants, dear speakers. It is an honor for me to be here, a part of this session. We are discussing crucial topics. We see that the potential is huge in order to participate in carbon market. Basically, Kazakhstan has always been an active partner in international agreements, whether we are talking about geopolitics or economics, because we have a lot of resources. But the potential that we actually have in order to participate in carbon markets has not been implemented fully, because we have huge potential. As we have calculated, we can work. The annual potential is about 45 million tons. This is a huge number, actually, but nevertheless, this is not a huge figure if we compare it with our neighbors like Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan, for example. In their countries, the potential is about 145 million tons. The price for carbon units are various, depending on the project, depending on the standards, but starting from $8 to $25 per ton can be estimated. If we're even talking about 10 tons, then the market can be estimated totally in billions of dollars. They are the huge numbers. But unfortunately, the Central Asian countries have not implemented that in full potential. There are a lot of reasons for that, but as the Vice Minister has said that Kazakhstan has implemented the system of carbon market, was the first country. In the neighboring countries, this system has not been implemented. It is either being discussed or just being implemented. We, as the country who has this mechanism working, Kazakhstan has not implemented it fully, especially if we are talking about Article 6.2, 6.4. There is an interesting mechanism. The countries who are reducing these emissions and they are working multilaterally, and Kazakhstan can implement that as well. The only thing is that Kazakhstan is regulating specific volume of the market. It's about 160 million tons. These are the figures of our emitters. There are others, about 170 units, which are not being regulated. It would be interesting to see what if the government will give the right to implement the carbon credits. We are not just saying about 45 millions. We have to work and we have to take responsibility under Paris Agreement. What if we give the right to work on voluntary markets? This could give this allowance could be given by the Ministry of Ecology, or other institutions, for example, the Ministry of Energy. In this case, the Ministry of Energy would be working on this on its own. They would be finding the investors. The question is where to sell them. Unfortunately, Kazakhstan is treating them as goods, while the international markets are working with them as bonds. And if we're talking about Europe, for example, 55 units are sold by financial institutions, and they are treating them as bonds, not as goods. If we are talking about internal documents, we have started working on on these ecological units. Now we are working on this on the basis of AIFC. If anyone is interested in that project, they can be working with them. There is a huge potential in order to work there at AIFC, not to be selling just the bonds which were created by Kazakhstan, but also the international ones. There is a huge interest in implementation of these projects. There are many limitations, technical limitations and methodological limitations, or human capital, but when there is the regulation, when
These problems could be easily solved with the grants. And this is a secondary question, but the first and foremost question is addressing the aforementioned issue. So by means of implementation of these units, Kazakhstan can resolve some of the issues. The issue on the attraction of the investments as well might become the revenue for the country by means of implementation of these units. And maybe won't be that big, but at the same time it will exist. So what I wanted to say, until stakeholders will be in unregulated sector as agriculture or energy efficiency, they cannot implement those projects because there are no platform. And there are technical limitations and constraints that would be barriers in order to implement. And the business itself will be looking for the cash flow and opportunities. Ministry of Ecology and Water Resources can actually control and become the regulator for the alignments and as well as the allocation of these quotas and grants and allowances. And Ministry of Economy can implement this stocks. It is probably won't become to concrete steps, but at the same time it can make the foundation that would be necessary. Thank you so much, Juanes. The main thing is that we started the work, the roadmap. What I would like to add here that this is high potential. This market has a high potential. There are many estimates and different evaluations. The carbon market had been estimated and valued differently, but at the same time, I would like to say that the average volume is the $600 billion. So 40% in 2025 is going to be carbon market. So Kazakhstan is the 0.000 something. But at the same time, we had signed together with other Central Asian countries. Colleagues, thank you so much. We tried to present our views briefly. We have a huge audience here, representatives of the business sector as well as the government, civil servants. And what is your view to the future? Do you believe that this could be possible? Could you give the microphone, please? Jandos Nurmagomedov, Vice President and Executive Director of the national company Kazenergy. Well, Well, regarding the carbon markets, the voluntary carbon markets, I understand that it's mainstream and trend. I don't know whether the Ministry of Ecology is presented here or not. The initiatives that had been promoted by the speakers on this panel and other sessions, we are the international company who are ready to invest into reduction of the carbon emissions, but unfortunately there are no legal framework. Everything what Dostum Kadirbayev does, it's just a belief that he will make this path, but we would like to wish best of luck. But we think that we had already received the draft of the roadmap, and I think that we need to raise awareness and talk about it as much as possible in order to make all of the correlations as well as the amendments. And the latest months when we had been elaborating on it, there's a fear from the government entities to make decisions because there's an understanding that these tones of reduced products will go somewhere, and Kazakhstan won't actually fulfill the responsibilities. I know that we're behind the schedule, but at the same time, I would like to add this thought. So we are ready to receive Qanish's recommendations, and we already have the Kaz energy on our own part, so maybe we could make the communication. Qanish, would you accept that? He can actually give us his recommendations and we would know what to do. And we will be trying to convince and convey the message, convince the government bodies. Thank you so much, Jandos, for your understanding and support of this market. Is there any volunteers? We have time for a couple of questions. Could you keep the microphone, please? My name is Bigjan. International Climate Change Solutions Company. We had been registered in IFC starting last year. Starting this year, May, we went to monitor 1 million hectares in Kostanay region. So nowadays we are conducting the surveys in order to understand there are different pathologies as well as the approaches that our farmers are voicing. So the transition and the entry point to the green economy and green technologies is too expensive. So which means that we are measuring 1 kilogram of the soil and trying to see whether how much it would cost when we talk about carbon farming, right? In regards to carbon farming. And of course, we understand that the sums are quite huge, but through the grants we can cover those expenditures, but at the same time entry point is quite expensive. And up to what extent farmers could bear responsibility regarding those expenditures and what would be the benefits, and won't those, as Dr. Elmas had already elaborated, is there any fiscal risks? Initiatives are good, I understand, but at the same time, Mr. Thompson says that some of the initiatives cannot be fulfilled because it is impossible to fulfill. So up to what extent you could estimate whether Kazakhstan is right track or not, and what players are necessary for soft infrastructure for the development? Is the question clear? Yes. Well, we need to understand the cropland and rangeland and different techniques. And when we talk about those who grow crops, for example, if they think that the yield will be compensated, for example, right? I'm ready, but it doesn't happen. So the cost of the yield is actually is quite bigger rather than we could recover So, and 3 years will pass for the soil resting, and only after that we could grow crops. So farmers are quite disappointed because yield is getting lower and lower. It is decreasing, and those subsidies are not covering it. It is the different story in other sectors, and the expenditures are not that big, and we understand that carbon farming is rotated, so we understand that we need to attract different solutions, and we decided to have Shokala, which is the electronic shepherd, and the pastures is totally a different story, because on the market it's like $300 is the cow, but we found some entities that could do that half price, but we're not selling it to the market. We're selling B2B, which is off-take. And with off-take, you can have the targeted financing so that technical part would be changed, because if you won't use the mineral but organic fertilizers, it is also a huge problem. It doesn't resolve right away. So on one hand, you need to have Ministry of Agriculture to monitor the soil usage, because this is something that is going to be foreseen by the legal framework. If everything will be described and provided there, we will have the arbitrage and fines, and we will have the normal practices. And also, it is important for institutes to be working, and regulatory frameworks would be working, and those institutes who would validate and verificate that you will need the MRV institutes. All of these tools are quite expensive, and methodologies that will be adopted are also important. Will verificators and validators would, in international market, accept what we have developed? Thank you, Dosim, so much. I see two hands, but Ruslan Muratov was first one. He's the vice president of the stock FTA, which had been selling the emissions. STV, please, if you could talk about it. And we have regulated and voluntary market. Well, briefly, the question is probably going to be addressed upon this. You have said that IPO between the countries in Central Asia, for example, what you are offering, you want 6.2 or 6.4. Let's forget what Dosim had mentioned, institutional ones, for example. Neighbors are not developed, we're more developed. Which way would you prefer? Well, I think you're the one who can address this issue better than I could do. Well, here we need to look at what is easier to do. I think that 6.2, it is the most favorable version. I'd like to add that 6.4, there's no intimo, so 6.2 corresponding adjustments.
From Experts France. One question. Under the Kyoto Protocol, the emission trading scheme has been, I think we can say it, a failure. It hasn't matched its objective, which was to provide a clear pricing signal for the companies, for all the actors to lead to the transition according to the behaviors that Mr. Ilmaz has been very accurately describing. So what makes you think that this new mechanism will be more successful under the Paris Agreement? As far as I'm concerned, I think it's going to be even more challenging because there's less pressure on each government. My second question in relation to that, if the Central Asian countries are really serious when they talk about carbon transition, carbon neutrality, shouldn't they consider, and shouldn't we start talking about a carbon tax?
Who will be first? Please, Willy.
To whoever has the answer.
Yeah, please.
I'll come in on that, the second question first, because although we do a lot of work on carbon markets at the OECD, I'm a much bigger fan of a carbon tax. I follow Dieter Helm, who wrote about this 15, 20 years ago, one of the best economists in Oxford working on these issues. In economic theory, cap and trade and a tax should deliver something similar. In practice, there are a variety of reasons why we would expect a tax to be more direct, more effective. It's something that if we had begun introducing it at a very low level and just slowly ramping it up several decades ago, we would now live with very, very comfortably. And I think it's unfortunate, that we have not done that. I think there is much to be done that could make carbon markets more effective, in particular by, phasing out free permits, setting floor prices. I mean, there's a lot that could be done to make them work better. But I freely admit, and this is me personally, the OECD has no position as an organization on this particular choice, but I will always vote for a clearly defined and well-designed carbon tax, given that opportunity. And there aren't many subjects on which I will choose a tax over a market. This is unusual.
Okay, thank you very much, dear colleagues. Unfortunately, we need to conclude our session because time is finishing. Maybe a last question, maybe we send our speaker after finishing this session. And let me thank once again for our committee this session. First of all, Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources, to all speakers, including representative OECD, SIPA, IDRI, University of Central Asia, AFD, and other speakers.
Dear colleagues, I would like to express gratitude for participation. I know that 1 hour is not enough, but all of us are open to talk to speakers. Let's give round of applause for speakers for this session. We hope that you will prepare the recommendation and then send to the Ministry of Ecology. Thank you so much for the interpreters, by the way.